Good evening. I'm Paul Fredette, and with me here is Karen, my wife, and his presentation this evening. We minister to hermits and to religious solitaries around the world through Ravensbread Ministries of Western North Carolina. In the last few presentations, we've been moving slowly through some of the themes in our work, Consider the Ravens. Last week, we offered about a few dozen individuals whom Karen and I feel were courageous pathfinders, so to speak, from about the 1950s on into this new millennium in the resurgence of eremitic life here in the West. Numbers, and certainly 24 people doesn't make for a trend, but numbers are useful in studying trends. Here's an eyebrow. After all, who would have thought that a small newsletter like Ravensbread, with no advertising and no promotion, written specifically for solitaries, would attract 1,000 subscribers, not to mention hundreds and hundreds of others who view us online, whom we never even know about.
Yes, we average about 400. And only today I heard from one of our lurkers who admitted he had been dropping in on us for several years.
The main service that not recognition in the sense of fame or status, recognition in the sense that it offers hermits and religious solitaries around the world an opportunity to discover the truth of their lives, or are they particularly odd? The truth is that Ravensbread readers are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to totaling up religious solitaries in the world, even just in the Western Hemisphere. After all, how do you count people who have no wish to be found? Deliberately avoid attention. Would that we could enlist a group of hermit spotters and turn them loose with no. But hermits are a lot like spotted owls, and they're skilled at blending into their own environment.
You know, you could say that we could probably start counting the number of hermits by those who subscribe to Ravensbread, but as Paul said, number of the actual ones, and most of the Ravensbread readers have been in the English-speaking countries. Accountable, not to mention unaccountable, for there is no Bureau of Registered Hermits, and that's just fine with them. We've suggested from, or one of our readers has suggested that perhaps the reader become a membership. And when we proposed that idea in a newsletter, the response was a very loud nay. They did not want to become a member. They were happy to receive Ravensbread and to know that there were others sharing their interest in their lifestyle for them to belong to anything.
Mm-hmm. It's true. When we did make this suggestion, after the response was overwhelmingly no, from a variety of different quarters. Most of them responded that those of us who've been in communities before know that as soon as you organize people, the individual's spiritual development more or less goes into cardio for that to happen. They had worked too hard and had gone through too much to go back to those kinds of constraints. One of the readers, however, put it very well, and I'd like to share with you what that reader said about the kind of loose spiritual fellowship of Ravensbread and formed that community in the most ethereal sense of the word. You have created a unified. In this world of individuality and ego dominance, the mystery of humanity as the organically connected mystical body, even quantum physics, is witness to our spiritual union with each other. Hermits especially need that interconnected concept engraved on their psyche via contemplative experience, because it is imperative to realize how our personal search for an prayer impacts on all of humanity. Otherwise, hermit life would not make sense in the light of the good news.
And that is a profound expression of the mystery of what hermit life survey in 2001. We came up with a number of surprising statistics. Some have changed a bit since then, at least in our small ability to take note of these changes. But initially, with our 100 hermits in 27 countries around the world, and nearly all the states in the United States, as well as Canada, Mexico.
And of the 600 surveys that were sent out, 22% of them were returned. This is an extraordinary response rate, considering that those surveyed were persons who have chosen a life that's defined by hiddenness. The information so generously contributed has produced, to date, the life that exists. And it was a picture full of surprises that not many could have predicted.
So, or women, and at what age? The statistics from our survey back in 2001 indicated that at least a third were men, 2/3 were women. And that sort of correlated with the number of people who were subscribed, at least on the surface, because nearly 50% of the readers of Ravensbread today are now men. Now, that may just be that they're willing to make themselves known a little more than they did then, or it may be that they value the connection that Ravensbread gives them. The ages of the hermits, the most part, the largest number were between the ages of 50 and 59. And this correlates with the understanding that hermit life is by about a third of the respondents were in their 60s. And another fair number were in their long had these individuals been living in solitude.
Well, that was interesting too. The years seemed fewer than expected, but then until we considered that how recent the revival really is. The earliest dates cited, but we also, as Karen has just mentioned, discovered that this lifestyle usually was entered upon at midlife. And we also have to bear in mind that hermits with canonical recognition can't really date themselves back further than 1983, when the revised Code of Canon Law in the Roman the canon that reestablished hermit life as an official form of consecrated life took effect. 16% of the respondents surveyed were canonically recognized by 2001. And of these, some had just been recognized in another 20 years. Of course, there was another 84% who've been just doing it, so to speak, and 30 years.
While discussing age, especially when you think of over 50, you're bound to ask, well, what about mental and physical health? It was encouraging to note that of those, we gave them marking down where they considered themselves as on the range of health, as poor, fair. Nearly more than half said that they enjoyed better than average health, while another 30% said their health was very good. And the small little humorous remarks that slipped in was an indirect testimony of these hermits. On the other hand, it's very interesting that chronic illness or disability can actually become a doorway to living the hermit life. It can be a solitary way for it to develop. And I'd like to share a quote from Sister Laurel O'Neill from Stillsong Hermitage in California, who in 1989. She wrote, "I believe that the call to chronic illness itself is, at least for some, an eremitic vocation to being sick within the Church, as a solitary witness value that is potentially more is generally more severely tyrannized by our capitalistic and materialistic world." In other words, they are discounted. Not only great richness, but an innate poverty as well, which is both ineluctable and inescapable. A poverty in the face of which one must either find that God is enough or despair. Witness to the fact that their lives are of infinite value, not because of who they are or what they do, but because God Himself regards them as precious. In accepting their situation as a call to solitude, the chronically ill person is freed from the false sense of self offered by society. And in the wilderness of the hermitage, assumes that identity which God Himself has bestowed upon them. Such a solitary says clearly that every person, at whatever stage in his or her own life, can do the same thing. It is a task and a challenge to us. We are all called to live up to the preciousness we are in God's eyes.
As we've noted several times, the call comes to people in midlife more often than not, and that we're in correspondence with, one cycle of their lives has already passed. For many of these people, they were aware early on in their lives that of this call, inchoate as it might have been, to solitary life. But as some of them said, and so much later on in life, they finally felt that if they had done it earlier, it would have been a real disaster. Experiences in life that they were able to engage this life in a fruitful manner. Some people said, I began to be drawn towards solitude gradually since my college years. Others said they discovered a sacred presence while they were hiking alone in the mountains and the forest. They, by their own admission, say that maturing was required. And they took that time and matured before embarking on this particular call. One person said, "Through the tragedies of my life, I became willing to listen to my inner life. I went into total isolation where I offered prayer for others following a monastic rhythm. When I visited a local to hermit life."
Well, we are talking about hermits all over, but where actually do hermits live? We're more in touch with hermits in the English-speaking world, so we can speak of Britain, Wales, Scotland, and the misty moors and craggy coasts of the Isle of Saints, Ireland. We've had a hermit write to us from that very distant island of Iona, or another one from the windswept sort of provides natural barriers if people want to be solitaries. It seems that islands do appeal to hermits around the world.
Mm-hmm.
For we have hermits in Malaysia, in the Philippines, Iceland, and Qatar. And then think of New Zealand, Australia, where we have hermits out in the rugged outbacks or in the more sparsely settled areas. Inaccessible forests. Only 2 of our respondents define their living place as in the wilderness. Half of them who responded said that they were living in a rural area and parts of the countries. We are continually surprised when we will get a subscription from one of the denizens of the canyons of New York City, where there are many subscribers to Raven Spread, people who are living in solitude, unknown to their neighbors, and can be just as solitary there as you could be where not a person saw you. You've heard the term hidden in clear sight these days.
Now, what religious affiliation do most hermits have is a question that we hear again and again. Are most Catholics are most hermits Roman Catholics? Well, Catholic being used as the universal or broad in sympathies definition. That's probably a term that describes. There are so many people who have had a variety of religious experiences and who have experimented with a variety of religious expressions. So the question of denominations is very complex when it comes to looking at religious solitaries and hermits. The survey respondents from 2000 church denominations. Roman Catholics made up 69% of the respondents. Anglican and of the respondents. And about 5 individuals came from each of the Baptists, the Lutherans, the Society of Friends, and some variety of Zen Buddhist affiliation. Many of the respondents had sampled more than one religious group before finding not so much a religion or a denomination, but a spirituality that nourished their hearts and supported their. Most interesting in the end was that a majority of the hermits that we surveyed responded that they lived an amalgam, that theirs was a way of looking at the world with a spiritual lens, disaffiliation. Even those who were most outwardly bonded to a particular church admitted an inner freedom that exceeded any single denomination. In other words, it seemed that the hermits had rediscovered what the first Christians wrote about themselves in the Acts of the Apostles, that Christianity was a way rather than a religion. And Hermitism that can be expressed in a variety of religions or none at all, if one defines religion in the strictest sense.
Only those who belong to the Catholic or the Episcopal Church have the option of being canonically recognized. That is, that they are considered religious in the strict sense of the word. In the Roman Catholic Church. Now, what we most found very interesting was that although this was possible to Catholics, not many of them actually took advantage of this option. Out of the 85 who responded, only 17 had actually made the public profession of being canonically received by their bishop voice. Now, many local ordinaries are not excited about having hermits in their diocese because they are afraid of ending up being responsible. That is, financially responsible for these hermits, even though that isn't asking of their bishop. There were also among the hermits, we had ordained men. I think we have one ordained woman among our hermits. And most of them are either the Roman Catholic persuasion. We have two deacons, one in the Maronite rite, another in the Disciples of Christ, and one Anglican. We also have people who were members of religious communities and were able to maintain that affiliation when they moved into hermit life.
For the hermits who are not affiliated with mainline Catholicism or the Anglican Church, the religion is still quite small, are the Oblates of Julian of Norwich. Some of you will recognize that name. Dame Julian was a 14th century beyond the brief information that gleaned from one book that she wrote entitled Showings. Today, there's an eremitic group with members across the UK and North America that take her as their patroness and their model. And these are joined by promises made to a quote-unquote mother who keeps the group informed and united. Both men and women can join the group. Most of these oblates are lay people. They're not members of the clergy. Many of the hermits in the Roman Catholic Church are also oblates and third-order members or seculars who are formally associated with established religious orders. Lay solitaries who made a public profession ecclesiastical authorities numbered 36 in the survey. Now, the people who made religious promises, many of them, most of them, made the traditional promises of poverty, chastity, and obedience. We simply made professions of chastity and obedience. We wondered if maybe those 6 had found that it was superfluous to make a vow of poverty, since not an option. One of the hermits had encompassed a vowed life under the public promise of simplicity, pure and simple. And a large number of other solitaries made private vows or promises witnessed either by priests or by spiritual guides or men. 6 of the respondents had made their solemn promises or vows to the actual group of which they were members.
So what are we to conclude? To paraphrase a common saying, many are being called to solitude, but few are being chosen by the churches. Thus, hermits and solitaries are responsible to the church, not through a religious group, but directly from the Spirit, directly from God. And this is not unusual. Well, like green grass between the cracks in the walk where the rocks have broken up. It will be a while until the church, as it were, canonize them and say, yes, we accept you, because you have stood the ultimate test, which is the test of time. We do know that life on the top of a pillar was rather a passing attraction, chosen for spiritual reasons, has passed the test of time, for it has always existed in various forms and in various places. Survey. We did not want to tilt the questions to, as it were, hold up some of our own unconscious assumptions. But we did wonder what was the most difficult things that it out. So we made a list, and we gave them a list of 6 items and asked them to check off or number them as to which were the most difficult. These included finding a suitable or affordable adequate income from appropriate work, finding supportive spiritual guidance, establishing good relationships with church authorities, keeping up their physical health, or having to meet up and overcome personal fear. Much to our surprise, most of the hermits checked off finding good spiritual guidance, relationships with church representatives as having been their biggest problems. We had expected that the majority would say finding a good living place or an appropriate source of income. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the material things that created it was the spiritual support that they were looking for and needed.
The renewal of eremitic life in the church not only surprised church authorities, it seems to have really disturbed them. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the movement was not, maybe it's just that the lack of control causes ecclesiastical unease. 26%, that's over a quarter of the respondents, named their relationship with the church as the major source of distress, while an equal percentage difficulty of finding an appropriate spiritual guide. So in other words, you have over 50% of these respondents were more of a hindrance than a help in their establishing themselves as hermits, as religious solitaries, who had 30 years under her belt in a cloister. And when she sought permission from the church to live in solitude, 4 separate dioceses denied her the right to live within their jurisdiction. In this case, ability and devotion wasn't enough to gain ecclesiastical approval. And if you're wondering why the bishops into their dioceses, the problem was, yes, money. Bishops appear to be suspicious of a financial plan that begins with the words, "Consider the lilies." They prefer that he or she be financially independent. The above named, now we have to remember, the above named hermit not asking for financial support, even for the very modest lifestyle that she envisioned. But this fact apparently sailed right past the episcopal ears, what was of most concern, and that's sad. And her story has been repeated in one way or another more than we care to know about. Fortunately, though, not all diocesan leaders suffer from spiritual hearing in touch with more recently have been welcomed into dioceses.
Yes.
At the same time, we have to say, not without undergoing a rigorous period of testing. Although finding a suitable place to live is initially a problem, or seemed to be initially a problem, for a good number, eventually all of them did establish themselves without much assistance from religious authorities. Even the question of finding adequate income really proves less troublesome than dealing with the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the saying attributed to the Desert Father Macarius is still the book of life. Macarius is known to have said, "This is the truth. If a monk regards contempt as praise, poverty as riches, and hunger as a feast, it remains true." And once again, repeating what is becoming pretty well established, since eremitical life is a second half of life vocation, many of the hermits who were involved in the survey indicated that they were recipients of. However, those governmental kinds of provisions are only guarantee a life that's well below the poverty level. The income for the majority, now that would be nearly 60% of the people who responded to the survey, was less than $20,000 per year. 41 of the 600 surveyed got by with $10,000 or less. And we even had one hermit scan the sidewalks for drop change so that she could use the money to buy bread at a local food bank.
Yes. Recognition, praise, and approval are not goals that a genuine hermit seeks. They are truly the hidden farmers and they must embrace the words of St. Paul. May I never boast of anything. Through it, the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. It means nothing whether one is recognized or not. All that matters is that one is created anew. Newly created desert gardeners of the 21st century are still cultivating the age-old fruits of solitude.
Before we move into our time of prayer together this evening, I'd just like to add one last thing. If any of you that are sharing of the results of that survey, the full results of that survey itself, they are available as a single resource, and they can be obtained if you go to our website, ravensbreadministries.com, and click on the resources page. You'll find it listed there as the 2001 copy upon your request. Now we'll begin our prayer time together with the lighting of the fire keeper this evening.
We light a light in the Savior who loves life, in the name of the Spirit who is the fire of life.
I'd like to share with you this passage from the Book of Wisdom. And understanding was given me. I called on God, and the Spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her to chariots and thrones, and knew that riches and wealth did not compare with wisdom. All gold is but a little sand in her sight, but wisdom is not ours unless God gives her to us. It is a mark of understanding to know whose gift she is. And so I prayed with my whole heart, O God of our mothers and fathers, O giver of every good gift and fountain of mercy, you formed humanity in your life. Send forth wisdom from the highest heaven, that she may labor at our side and we may learn what is pleasing to you. For she knows and understands all things and will guide us wisely in our actions. You are merciful to all, O God. You forgive our sins that we may grow in truth. You hate nothing that lives. Creation would not have been. Your ever-living Spirit is in all things, for they are yours. O you who love the living, grant us wisdom, that we may find friendship with you.
Last time and this time, we have had wisdom as the... If you were with us last week, you remember that we experienced a guided imagery. First of all, relax. Sit back. Wiggle your toes, kick off your shoes. Become just walk through a forest with a nice mossy floor if your feet are bare. And as you walk through the forest, pay attention to what is around you. The trees, the leaves waving in the breeze, the birds, the squirrels. Gradually, we ask that you come into a sun-filled clearing where God is, where you find someone waiting for you, a wise person. For some of our readers who got in touch with us, though Jesus was there with a tree branch in his hand rather than a shepherd's staff. And the person who came up to him heard a question. The question was, "Do you love me?" And she said she responded with the words of Peter, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." At the same time, as the silence expanded, she felt a question rising up within her, a question that said that she me. There was no answer in words, but a great sense of contentment welled up within her. And she remembered the words of Julian of Norwich, "All is well, and all shall be well." Other of our participants met up with and with whom they exchanged heartfelt questions and responses. Some people said a young boy said he was uncomfortable in this, and that's not an unusual experience. But most people said they experienced a deep serenity, for their wise person who put them at their ease. And now we ask you to return to this clearing. Take your time and walk through the woods again. Re-enter the sun-filled clearing and notice that there is someone waiting for you there. Was there the last time? Or is it another person? In imagination, anything is possible. So I'm going to ask you to allow something to happen. Gently merge yourself with the wise person. Allow yourself to become that wise person who is beholding you. What do you experience now as a wise person looking at yourself? What do you feel? Feelings are so important. They never lie. Listen to your feelings. Do they say anything to you? What are you hearing? Gradually, gently, allow yourself to disengage and come back into your own being. And now as you are there, look into the eyes of the wise person. Experience the exchange that goes on between you. What is happening now? Gradually now, you may withdraw from the clearing, come back to where you are, and somehow make a note of what has happened during this period of guided imagery? Did you learn something about yourself, about your situation in life? Did you learn that you need not keep up a mask in front of everyone? Did you realize that you are loved? Could you share with us what you experienced? We will share this with others next week, of course, and now Paul is going to share with us a prayer from the Celtic Book of Prayers.
Take time with us now to give thanks for the day that has been and pray for the life of our world. That you formed our bodies in the darkness of the womb and fashioned every creature from the soil of the earth. Thanks be to you, O God. That you knitted into our senses a thirst for water and a hunger for food, and wove into every living being desires for life and pleasure in their satisfaction. Thanks be to you, O God. Let us be alert to the yearnings that you have placed within us, and let us know what will truly satisfy the desires of our heart. Let us be attentive to the yearnings that you have planted in every human being. And let us be sure of what will fulfill them. Let us be guided by your wisdom, O God. Let us be guided by your wisdom. We want to thank you all for joining with us again this evening. To David and to Kedar and to Brother Sean for giving us so much valuable assistance and helping us as we make our foray for the first time into what definitely is for us high-tech land, helping us over the rough spots with each one of them. A big thank you. And now, the blessings of heaven, the blessings of earth, the blessings of sea and of and on every human family, the gift of heaven, the gifts of earth, the gifts of sea and sky. Good night, and God bless you.
It was a pleasure to be with you. We look forward to seeing you again.